Callen Stroud moved into Pinebrook like a whisper, quiet, unnoticed, and gone before anyone could ask the right questions. But Mara Ellwood, the librarian who lived next door, would soon discover that the man she shared a fence with wasn't just a stranger. He was a predator hiding in plain sight. What started as silent suspicion would unravel into a chilling nightmare, revealing secrets buried beneath floorboards, shadows behind curtains, and a terrifying truth. The most dangerous. Monsters are the ones who smile and wave. From right next door. In the small town of Pinebrook, life had always moved at a gentle, predictable pace. Rows of cozy houses lined the streets. Children played on front lawns, and neighbors shared small talk over fences. Everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. It was the kind of place where strangers were noticed instantly, and gossip moved faster than the wind. When Callen Stroud moved into the vacant house next to Mara Ellwood's, the town took notice, but curiosity quickly faded when he proved to be quiet and respectful. Callen arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October. A moving van came and went in just under 2 hours, and no one saw who helped him unpack. His car, a dark green sedan with no bumper stickers and spotless windows, was parked neatly in the driveway. He didn't wave to the neighbors or join community events, but he wasn't rude either. He kept his lawn tidy, his trash bins properly arranged, and never caused any noise disturbances. For many, that was enough to ignore the strangeness that clung to him like fog. Mara Ellwood had lived in her home for over 10 years. A school librarian by profession, she enjoyed the silence of her routine. Books, tea, her cat Violet, and evening walks were the extent of her world, and she liked it. That way, when Callen moved in next door, she noticed him in a distant sort of way. Someone she passed by on occasion, someone she saw collecting mail or trimming hedges. Nothing unusual stood out, not at first. But over the following weeks, Mara began to feel uneasy. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a subtle discomfort that grew stronger with time. One evening, while walking past his house, she thought she saw him watching her from the upstairs window. The lights were off, and the shape of a figure was barely visible, yet it was enough to send a chill through her. She told herself it was nothing. Shadows could play tricks, especially when seen through trees and glass. The first real incident came when Violet, her gray tabby cat, didn't come home one night. It was unlike her. Mara searched the neighborhood, called her name, even printed small posters to put on street corners. Several neighbors mentioned other pets going missing in recent months. Dogs escaping from fenced yards, birds vanishing from porches. The pattern was disturbing, but since Pinebrook wasn't known for crime, most chalked it up to coyotes or other wildlife. Callen never offered to help search, never acknowledged the missing animals. That, in itself, wasn't suspicious. After all, he barely interacted with anyone, but something about his silence felt colder than it should have. Mara began to pay closer attention. His lights would flicker on at odd hours, sometimes after midnight. There was a soft humming sound she occasionally heard from his attic window, almost mechanical, like a machine running. She once saw a large box being dragged into his garage, heavy enough that he had to push it inch by inch. Rumors started quietly. A group of neighborhood moms whispered about him at the local grocery store. A mail carrier mentioned that Callen received a lot of packages, always plain brown boxes with no return address. One older man who walked his dog past Callen's house daily claimed he saw someone else in the house once, someone thin and pale, peering through a curtain for only a second. Still, no one acted. Pinebrook wasn't the type of place where people jumped to conclusions. The police weren't called. There was no confrontation. People talked, speculated, but ultimately kept their distance. It was easier that way. Mara tried to ignore her suspicions, but they followed her like shadows. Her dreams became restless, filled with images she couldn't explain. And through it all, Callen remained polite, distant, and always alone. She didn't know then that he had already changed the town forever. 3 months had passed since Callen Stroud moved into the quiet neighborhood of Pinebrook, and by then, the town had mostly adjusted to his presence. He remained a figure of mild suspicion for some and complete mystery to others. The uneasiness hadn't gone away, but without any real reason to act, people buried their discomfort beneath routine. Then one afternoon, everything shifted. Jenna Voss was a 27-year-old artist who had recently moved into a rented studio apartment near Pinebrook's town square. She was well-liked, always smiling, always polite. She sold hand-painted pottery at the weekend markets and had started giving art lessons to children at the local community center. She had no known enemies, no dark past, and no reason to simply vanish. On a Friday morning, Jenna didn't show up to teach her class. At first, no one panicked. People assumed she'd overslept or had an emergency. But when her phone went straight to voicemail and her apartment remained locked from the outside, concern turned to fear. Her car was found abandoned near a gas station on the outskirts of town, the driver's side door unlocked and her keys still in the ignition. Her purse and wallet were inside, but her sketchbook was missing. The town rallied. Flyers were posted on every corner, search parties organized, day and night. Drones scanned the wooded areas, police combed through surveillance footage, and volunteers searched parks, fields, and abandoned buildings. But no trace of Jenna turned up. She had seemingly disappeared into thin air. The media attention hit Pinebrook hard. Reporters swarmed the town, turning every whisper into speculation. That's when the rumors about Callen Stroud grew louder. People remembered the missing pets. They recalled the strange lights, the late-night noises, the mechanical humming that came from his attic window. Whispers became louder until finally the police knocked on Callen's door. He answered calmly, let them in without hesitation. Officers searched the house but found nothing suspicious. No sign of Jenna. No blood, no clothing, no evidence of a struggle. Just a clean, neatly arranged home that smelled faintly of bleach. The officers left, and the town was left to wonder. Had they been wrong about him? Or had he just been careful? For Mara Ellwood, the disappearance stirred something deeper. She remembered seeing Jenna walking down her street a few weeks before she vanished. Jenna had paused outside Callen's house, as if admiring his garden. It wasn't unusual. Callen's roses were the envy of the block. But now, that memory felt different. More ominous. Mara began noticing other small details. Callen's trash bins were always perfectly organized, yet she never saw him take them out. His curtains remained drawn, even on sunny days. His car, once spotted leaving early in the mornings, now rarely moved at all. He seemed to vanish during the day and return long after dark. One night, Mara sat in her living room reading when she heard a soft metallic sound coming from outside, like a lock turning. She peeked through the blinds and saw Callen in his backyard, kneeling beside his garden shed. He was dragging something heavy. She couldn't make out what it was, but it looked like a tarp, stained and wet. He moved methodically, not rushing, not hesitating. The next morning, she walked her dog past his house, her eyes drawn to the shed. The lock was new, heavy-duty, and freshly installed. A faint scent, something chemical and unpleasant, lingered in the air. Her skin crawled, but she said nothing. Though the police had cleared Callen for now, the town remained on edge. Jenna's family refused to give up. They believed someone in Pinebrook knew what had happened, and deep down, many neighbors began to share that belief. Because even without proof, some things felt too wrong to ignore, and Mara, once the quiet librarian, began to watch. Not because she was curious, but because she was afraid. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when a power outage swept across Pinebrook. Streetlights flickered once and went dark, leaving the neighborhood shrouded in a strange quiet. In most homes, people lit candles, turned on flashlights, and waited for the electricity to return. For Mara Ellwood, the silence felt heavier than usual. She sat by her window, listening to the stillness outside, her eyes drawn again and again to the house next door. An unexpected knock at the door startled her. She hesitated before answering. Standing on her porch, holding an unlit flashlight, was Callen Stroud. His face was blank, his tone flat as he asked if she had a working flashlight to spare. She handed him one from a drawer without stepping outside. He nodded in thanks and disappeared into the dark. The brief exchange unsettled her more than it should have. Something about the way he had appeared, wordless, almost expressionless, reminded her of a shadow that had wandered too close. She returned to her window, watching as his silhouette moved through his yard, the flashlight beam trembling across the ground. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. The memory of Jenna Voss lingered in her thoughts, and with each passing day, she felt more convinced that Callen knew something. She began researching him online, expecting at least some digital trail, a high school yearbook photo, an old job listing, maybe even a traffic violation. But there was nothing. No social media, no employment records, not even a registered address prior to Pinebrook. It was as if he had never existed before the day he moved in. Curiosity grew into obsession. She started documenting his patterns, when he left, when he returned, what deliveries he received. At first, it felt foolish, like she was chasing ghosts. But then she found the key. It happened by accident. While walking her dog near the back fence that separated her yard from Callen's, she noticed something shiny half buried in the dirt. She bent down and pulled out a rusted key attached to a faded red tag. It looked old, maybe forgotten, yet something told her it mattered. She turned it over in her hand for a long time, staring at it as if it might whisper answers. Later that evening, when she saw Callen leave in his car, she acted. Her hands shook as she approached his yard, heart pounding against her ribs. The garden shed loomed in front of her, locked with a thick padlock. She tried the key. It clicked. The door creaked open to reveal darkness, and a strong chemical smell hit her immediately. She covered her mouth and stepped inside. Her flashlight revealed a grim interior, metal cages stacked against the walls, a tripod in the corner with a camera still attached, and scattered pieces of torn clothing. There were ropes, zip ties, and what looked like dried blood on the wooden floor. A large locked chest sat in the corner. She reached for it but stopped. Her stomach turned. It was too much. She backed out quickly, relocked the door, and ran back to her house, clutching the key like a lifeline. She didn't sleep that night. Her mind raced with images of what she'd seen. The cage, the tripod, the blood. She knew she had to call the police. But when they arrived the next morning, the shed had been emptied. No cages, no chest, no camera. Just a bare wooden floor and a faint chemical scent that still lingered in the air. The officers took her statement seriously, but without evidence, there was little they could do. They noted her findings and promised to keep an eye on him. Mara was left shaken. She had seen the truth. She was certain of it. But now that truth had been erased, cleaned away like chalk from a board. And what haunted her most was not just what she had found, but how quickly he had made it all disappear. The investigation into Jenna Voss's disappearance stalled. Days turned into weeks, and without hard evidence, public interest began to fade. But Mara Ellwood couldn't forget. She had seen the inside of that shed with her own eyes, had felt the weight of something deeply wrong in her bones. She didn't care that the police found nothing. She knew what she saw. And Callen Stroud knew she had seen it too. Tension grew between the neighbors, though no one spoke about it directly. Callen had returned to his normal routine, almost as if nothing had happened. He still trimmed his hedges with precision, still walked to his mailbox like a man without a secret. But there were subtle differences now. He parked his car in the garage instead of the driveway. He replaced his curtains with thicker ones. He installed new locks on every door and added security cameras outside his home. His house no longer looked like the home of a recluse. It looked like a fortress. One night, about 2 weeks after the shed incident, police returned to Callen's house with a warrant. They searched every room, every closet, every corner of the property. What they found was chilling. Under the carpet in the living room, officers discovered an irregular dip in the wooden flooring. When they pulled the carpet back and pried up the floorboards, they uncovered a hidden crawl space. It wasn't large, but it was deep enough for a grown person to lie down. Inside were signs of someone having lived there. A thin blanket, empty water bottles, food wrappers, scratched walls. Most disturbing of all, they found a tattered diary. The name written inside was Jenna Voss. The diary was brief, only a few entries, but each one offered a horrifying glimpse into her captivity. She described being taken, blindfolded, and kept in the dark for days. She spoke of hearing footsteps above her, muffled voices, and the feeling of being watched. She mentioned the sound of a camera clicking over and over. Her final entry was smudged, the ink blurred as if written through tears. She wrote that she no longer knew what day it was. She said she couldn't scream anymore. Along with the diary, investigators found a small box containing items that didn't belong to Jenna. A bracelet, a necklace, and a set of earrings. Each piece marked with a different name written in tiny letters on slips of paper. Only one of those names matched a known missing person. The others had no reports tied to them, no cases, no families looking. It suggested a terrifying possibility. Jenna wasn't the first. The discovery made headlines, and Pinebrook was plunged into a nightmare it had never imagined. Yet, despite this damning evidence, Callen was nowhere to be found. He had vanished. His car was gone. His bank accounts had been emptied. Even his birth certificate was under scrutiny. Authorities could not find a single real record of him before the day he arrived in Pinebrook. Back at Mara's house, fear became a permanent presence. She double-checked her locks every night, installed cameras, slept with a light on. What disturbed her the most wasn't that Callen had gotten away, but how effortlessly he had done it. Like he'd planned for this moment all along. The community rallied behind the families of the victims, but nothing could erase the truth that had been unearthed beneath the floorboards of that house. Pinebrook was no longer a town of quiet streets and friendly faces. It had become the scene of something far darker. And Mara, once a quiet librarian with a peaceful life, now lived with the terrifying knowledge that for months, the monster, everyone, feared had been living just a few feet away, hidden behind walls, under floors, and in plain sight. Weeks passed, but the fear in Pinebrook never faded. The once peaceful town had been shaken to its core, its innocence shattered by what had been uncovered inside Callen Stroud's home. But perhaps what disturbed residents most was the fact that he had vanished without a trace. No camera had captured his escape. No witness had seen him leave. It was as if he had slipped out of existence, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. The case remained open, with national news outlets occasionally revisiting the story. Investigators followed countless leads, but none led to Callen. His trail had gone cold. The house he once lived in stood empty, marked by caution tape and boarded windows. It became a landmark of horror in the town, something kids dared each other to approach, and adults crossed the street to avoid. Inside her own home, Mara Ellwood lived in a constant state of alert. Every sound made her jump. Every knock on the door brought a surge of panic. Her once peaceful life had turned into a cycle of fear and obsession. She pored over every article, every rumor, every whisper that suggested he might have resurfaced somewhere. But there was nothing. No sightings, no new victims, at least none reported. One cold morning, Mara received a package on her doorstep. There was no return address, no markings on the box. just her name, typed neatly on a white label. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single item, a photograph. It showed her sleeping in bed. The image was recent. She recognized the book lying beside her, the mug of tea on her nightstand. The angle was from her bedroom window. Her blood ran cold. Someone had been watching her. Someone had taken this photo without her ever knowing. She contacted the police immediately. They examined the photo, searched her property, and reviewed her security footage. But the cameras had been disabled the night before. No images were recorded. No faces captured. The officers took the threat seriously. But once again, they had nothing to work with. No fingerprints, no leads, and no doubt who was behind it. Callen wasn't gone. He was watching. The incident set off a wave of renewed fear throughout Pinebrook. Others began reporting strange occurrences, footsteps outside windows, cars idling late at night, pets disappearing again, but nothing concrete, just enough to keep the town in a constant state of unease. And Callen never appeared, not openly. Over time, Mara made a decision. She moved out of Pinebrook, leaving behind the house she had called home for over a decade. She changed her phone number, quit her job, and relocated to another town under a different name. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not even close friends. Fear had reshaped her entire existence, and she could no longer live in the shadow of it. But even in her new life, she never felt completely safe. She checked behind her every time she walked home. She kept her curtains closed at night. And once, while unpacking groceries, she noticed a rose, fresh, vibrant, and identical to those in Callen's garden, sitting on her front porch. No note. No sound. Just the rose. The police again found no clues, no footprints, no witnesses. But to Mara, the message was clear. Callen Stroud hadn't just disappeared. He had become something more terrifying, an invisible presence, a shadow in the corner of the eye. A breath of air that didn't belong. He was no longer just the stranger beside her. He was the stranger behind her, always watching, always waiting. And she knew, deep down, that one day he would return.